What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about the top 10 budget Pokemon in Pokemon Go. So let's go ahead and define what a budget Pokemon is. First things first, it's going to be a Pokemon that costs 50 candy or less to evolve. Nextly, it's going to be a great attacker / defender. Then, it will be easy to find. Up next, it will have to be a non-legendary Pokemon. And then finally, a non-regional Pokemon. Mostly because there is one Pokemon that we kind of need to talk about from a regional perspective, but definitely going to cover. The last point is going to be that it doesn't need to require something like an evolution item. So sorry, Scizor, you are going to be cut off of the list. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So for the first set of Pokemon on this list, when you think of a budget Pokemon, I have to say that the Eeveelution Line definitely comes to my mind first. These Pokemon are decent attackers. They're not necessarily going to take the #1 spot, but they typically like to hang around the 3 to 4 spot pretty much out of all of the Eeveelutions. Sorry, Umbreon, I don't know if you need to be included on this list. But even extending past Generation 3, once Generation 4 gets here, you're going to have Glaceon and Leafeon, and I can promise you, they are going to be in a similar situation. So if you are looking for a decent team, especially at some lower levels, these are going to be a great set of budget Pokemon. Up next on this list is going to be looking at it from the fighting type, and that is Breloom and Hariyama. So when you're talking about these two Pokemon, they're actually going to be up here for two different reasons. So for Breloom, it's basically going to be up here because it is a fantastic attacker. If you go ahead and check out its attack stat, it is off of the charts. It's definitely going to actually be higher than Machamp's. So Machamp typically takes the #1 spot from the fighting type, but Breloom definitely gives it a run for its money. Then you have Hariyama on the flip side of things. Mostly for the fact that its stamina stat is off the chart. So what it lacks in attack, it does pick up in the ability to just be able to make it last in all of the different raid battles that you do. So these two Pokemon do have something in common, and it is going to be related to the moveset. It is going to be the best fighting type moveset that you can have. So these are going to be some perfect budget Pokemon behind your Machamp. So let's go ahead and move into the next set of Pokemon on this list. And that is a Lowland Executor and Executor. So these are going to be perfect budget Pokemon for you to have from a grass typing. I know that Venusaur kind of came out of nowhere with the Community Day moveset, but Executor is not that far behind and is definitely a solid option. Although a Lowland Executor technically has a little bit of a lower attack stat, it's still going to be great from that grass typing. I would personally shy away from the Dragon type, but that's just me. Secondly, you have just the regular Executor, which could technically function very well as a Psychic type budget as well. So it really just depends on what you want to do with these, but either way, you will not be disappointed in using them. Up next on this list is Pincer from the bug typing. This would be the moment where I would mention Heracross on this list, but because of Heracross being a regional Pokemon, I decided to take it off. But if you do have access to Heracross, you could definitely put it on this same position. So Pincer has an incredibly high attack stat. It is going to be a Pokemon that I personally think is going to be a great budget option to something like a Scizor. Beyond that, it actually has a fairly good moveset from the bug typing as well, something that I personally think classifies it as a budget type Pokemon. Because you have access to it in the wild, you can easily catch it up to level 35. I've seen so many Pincers in the wild, and it is something that I think you will be excited to use. Let's go ahead and get into the next Pokemon from the Dark type. We have Houndoom. So Houndoom is an incredible Pokemon from the Dark typing. Oftentimes it does get overshadowed by something like a Tyranitar, but it does have a little bit of some advantage. First off, let's go ahead and briefly look at the stats. But when we're talking about the advantage the Houndoom has, it actually has a more ideal Dark type moveset than something like a Tyranitar. Since Tyranitar only has access to Crunch, Houndoom can technically outperform it from just the better moveset, but unfortunately its stats do not propel it past Tyranitar. But either way, it's going to be a great budget Pokemon that I definitely think you would enjoy. So up next on this list is going to be some Pokemon from the poison typing. And that is a Lowland Monk and Muck. So with these Pokemon, if you go ahead and look past the attack stat, they're actually going to be fairly good in so many other ways. Typically, you could use them as a defender, but they're truly not that bad as a poison type attacker. You have a fairly good moveset to talk about. But even beyond that, you've got some alter usability from the Lowland Monk standpoint. Because it does pick up that dark typing, you can now obtain stab by using the dark type movesets. So for me personally, I use the regular Monk as a poison type attacker, and then the Lowland Monk as a dark type attacker. But either way, these are going to be some incredible Pokemon that I highly recommend you to use. Definitely going to be one of the top budget Pokemon, and something that I do not think you will be disappointed with. Let's go ahead and get into the next Pokemon that will be from an Ice type standpoint, and that is Jinx. So go ahead and check this out. This is going to be a Pokemon that is incredible budget Pokemon from the Ice typing because of its incredibly high attack stat. Beyond the attack stat, it also has an incredible moveset. But beyond that, it's actually got a higher attack stat than something like an Articuno. So in my opinion, I think Jinx is going to be fairly impressive considering it is a non-legendary Pokemon. It is something that's going to be fairly accessible in the wild. It's not going to obviously cost a lot of candy. The only time it will cost candy is if you do have the baby Pokemon. But a little bit of a fun story is this is actually the first 100% IV Pokemon that I ever caught in Pokemon Go. So who knows, maybe I have a little bit of a soft spot for something like a Jinx, but I definitely think it's going to be an incredible budget Pokemon. Let's go ahead and get into two more Pokemon that's going to be fairly interesting. And that's going to be the fact that they are an incredible budget Pokemon now, but technically once Generation 4 gets here, they are going to have a new evolution. The first one is going to be Rhydon. This is going to be a special stat about Rhydon. Once RHyperior gets put into the game, Rhydon will officially be the highest CP middle evolution Pokemon in the entire game. That is incredible to have. So Rhydon is going to be fantastic to have from that ground typing. It has an incredible set of stats, and it also has a moveset to match it. It's going to be an incredible budget type Pokemon right now that you can use in the game, but it is good to go ahead and get ready for it, because once RHyperior gets here, RHyperior is going to be a Pokemon that will dominate, potentially from the rock type as well. So when we're talking about another Pokemon that technically performs well now, that will also get a Generation 4 evolution, that is Piloswine. So Piloswine is not a bad Pokemon to have from the Ice typing. If you took advantage of the Johto event, you surely caught a lot of Swinubs, hopefully evolved it into some Piloswine, but once it evolves into Mamoswine, it is going to dominate from that Ice typing. But for now, Piloswine is definitely a budget Pokemon. So we talked a lot about attackers on this list, so I wanted to go ahead and end it with taking a look at a couple of great budget defenders, and that is going to be Wigglytuff, Miltank, and Donphan. So for Wigglytuff, this is actually a user entry. I asked it on Twitter. I had so many people mention Wigglytuff as a great defender. This is going to be good because it does have such a low CP. It's going to decay at a much slower rate, and something that I think a lot of people want to use. Up next, you have Miltank. I would argue that Miltank is going to be kind of the poor man version of something like a Snorlax. It even has the move Body Slam and Zen Headbutt that you can use just like you would with a Snorlax. But with the recent Johto event, it's definitely going to be so much more available in the wild. Up next, you have Donphan. Donphan actually has a very good set of stats. The only thing that ever held it back was, unfortunately, a pretty bad moveset. But beyond just that bad moveset, it actually ends up working somewhat in its favor from a defensive standpoint. So those are going to be the budget defensive Pokemon. I hope you did enjoy this episode. I want to go ahead and end on a question of the day. And that is going to be, from this list, what do you think is the best budget Pokemon in Pokemon Go? Go ahead and let me know in the comments section below, and I will see you next time.
Hit me like a tidal wave, triggered by the aftershock.